101.7 FM and 710 Keel. Greg Adams hanging out in the studio this afternoon with a nationally recognized psychic medium. You've probably seen his work on Sci-Fi, Chiller, or NBC. Local to our area. Shreveport native, right?
Shreveport native,
Shreveport native, Dakota Lawrence, joining us in the studio. Thanks for taking time with us.
Oh, it's always a pleasure.
We are coming up on Halloween, and so I thought we would do what we should do around Halloween and not just talk about scary movies, but talk about the things that we can actually see and visit locally.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot. There is. And when you called me, I was like, Greg, really? It's Halloween season. Come on.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
you're busy.
I have time to come hang out with you.
You're extremely busy this time of year, so we will keep it brief as we can when we talk about these kind of things. But as we've talked about before, Shreveport is... Well, Louisiana as a whole, everyone knows Louisiana is it fair to say, the most haunted state? Pound for pound. What if I say pound for pound, the most haunted state?
I think as far as public recognition, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So being that we are the most haunted state, Shreveport is not the go-to. I mean, New Orleans is, of course, the go-to. And I've heard people talk about how haunted places like Natchitoches are and even Lafayette. I've heard that before. Lafayette, very haunted. But Shreveport, in and of itself, is a very recognized as being haunted
city.
city.
We were the port city at one point. Yeah, I mean, you got to think about it. Shreveport during the late 1800s when this area was booming. You know, it was during that time period. There was so much going on downtown, and I think you and I talked about this. Downtown was essentially the Wild West of Louisiana.
Yeah, well, we had Shreveport historian, Register of Voters, Ernie Roberson in at one point, who said, like, Shreveport was unique in the sense that you had the Wild West. We were like that line where the Wild West was meeting the pioneers that were meeting... I don't want to say conquistadors, but you know what I mean. Like you had,
well, that happened too, though. But no.
Right, but all at one time, you had all of these different layers of early American lifestyle all meeting in one place, and it was all happening in places that were port cities like Shreveport, like New Orleans, where all of a sudden all of these cultures are meeting and they're learning to coexist for the first time ever. And in a lot of ways, when you have that Wild West element, a lot of times it led to negative scenarios and loss of life.
And it's like, you know, taken in, for instance, I mean, go down to New Orleans, you had the French Quarter and the Central Business District, which was the American side and the French side. And, you know, where Shreveport didn't have that kind of segregation going on, it definitely was at one point a big melting pot. And when you go downtown and you read about downtown and you visit, you know, the Spring Street Museum and all that area, you know, we had the gambling halls. Gambling wasn't new when the casinos came in. It had been here. You know, y'all can forget about Louisiana Downs. I mean, we're talking the OG of gambling used to be downtown Shreveport. And you had the brothels, you had the drinking. During Prohibition, you had the speakeasies. You know, you had all those things going on.
So with Shreveport being as haunted as it is,
yes.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about were your three favorite haunted locations. Last time you were in, we talked about like trying to single out one if you had to say that's the most haunted location. But I wanted to ask what your three favorite,
my personal favorites.
Your personal favorite three locations.
Okay, you're going to know my number one, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. What's your number three?
Number three is Spring Street Museum, which was the old Tally's Bank building. And it is now a museum. If you guys haven't been there, support your local museums, support those kind of things like that. But it has, I believe the man's name was Edward Jacobs, who was the president of that bank at that time. And the museum creator has even talked about, I forget, his name escapes me right now, but he talked about the instances that he's had. Like one time he saw a door open by itself and he climbed off the ladder. And had he not climbed off the ladder, when he closed the door, the ladder fell by itself. So that the ghost, you know, spared his life and saved him. And there was another time, like, oh, I need some more light in here. And as soon as he said that, there was a light surge that happened and it turned on the light. So there's been like little weird instances like that. And when you go there, I would say that you do definitely feel that creep vibe. Now, that's a good way to describe it.
Is there anything in particular that would lead to that location being haunted? Is there like... Things happen there, but do we know why?
You don't always have to have it be a murder. People always think, oh, it's got to be a tragic death. It's got to be a this. It's got to be a that. If you really loved your job or you really loved that location, there can still be an energetic imprint left behind. you can still have part of you resting there, you know, and part of you that still watches over that location.
We are talking with nationally recognized psychic medium Dakota Lawrence from Shreveport. You've seen him on Sci-Fi, Chiller, NBC. We're talking about his 3 favorite haunted locations of the Arklatex. What is number 2 on that list?
Number 2 is the Municipal Auditorium.
Wait. Now, I thought that was... Okay, you said I would know your number 1. I thought that was going to be number 1, so it's number 2. That excites me about number 1, but I'm familiar with the hauntings of the Municipal, but for those who are not familiar, why is it on your list?
Because number 1 is a history of the, you know, you're talking about, you know, just taking out the fact that it's haunted. Elvis was hanging out there, and it's the king, you know, and there's rumors that Elvis has never left the building, which, you know, I don't necessarily believe, but I believe that a lot of your haunting with the Municipal and my number 1 location is to blame from the cemetery being next door.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So with the Municipal, there have been actually TV shows that have dealt with that.
You had Ghost Lab, and as well as Ghost Hunters were both filmed there. And I think that a lot of it has to do with, you're talking less than 100 feet from the location. You have the largest mass burial ground. When we had the yellow fever epidemic come through Shreveport, Shreveport was almost demolished. You know, and you're talking, we were having to drag our dead out to the streets, and the carts would come through and pick them up, and there was no way we could bury them quick enough. And I believe their numbers is in the 750s. It's believed to actually even be higher than that. And it's literally, when you walk out to that cemetery, it's kind of creepy because it's, oh, well, here's the burial mound, and it's literally a mound.
So the Municipal... If you were to say why it's haunted, and I actually, honestly, I don't know how many people have refuted that the Municipal is haunted. I think it's it's gone past the idea that it's haunted into, it's no longer folklore. People just go, yeah, the Municipal's haunted.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it is. Yeah.
So you think that the reason that a place like that would be haunted is more or less the proximity to something like the mass burial.
Well, I mean, and you have to think about, you know, we don't just stay or die. We don't stay in just one location. You know, we can still walk around as spirits, you know. You know, why do you think ghosts walk through walls? You know, not like, oh, hey, guys, watch this, and they just walk through a wall. You know, it'd be cool, like a little ghost trick they do together to go and have a shot. You know, I mean, come on. So, you know, with something...
Are you suggesting that if there is paranormal activity, if there are ghosts, that they are attracted to that location because it's cool?
If I was a ghost, I'd want to hang out there, yeah.
Fair enough.
People are always going to say, well, aren't you worried about a ghost following you home? I'm like, I'm in a mansion. Why would I want to leave a mansion to go to an apartment?
Right.
But I believe that, you know, especially when you go to New Orleans, we can talk about that, you know, at some point. But, you know, we don't have to stay in one spot. And I think that because of the mass burial, because of the things that happened there, we don't know what all happened back then. You know, we don't know what all took place there. And you could have had the body stacked up right in front of the location where the Municipal is today.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So prior to the existence of a Municipal Auditorium, if something were to happen at that location, when, I mean, like you just said, that where the stage currently sits right now, something tragic could have happened in that particular spot, and it could create the elements that bring paranormal activity on, and then you build a building on top of it.
Well, I mean, it's just like Amityville with the built upon a cemetery. You know, so you have to go into so many different things like that it's not necessarily the building, it can be the land. And, you know, and it holds history.
Yeah.
It holds history. And I think that's the best way to describe it, is it holds history.
We're talking to nationally recognized psychic medium Dakota Lawrence, Shreveport native. You can catch him at events at Logan Mansion and also various events across Jefferson, Texas, and all throughout the state. You've probably seen his work, Sci-Fi, Chiller, and NBC. We're talking about his 3 favorite haunted locations across the Arklatex, and we've made it to number 1. You teased it a little bit. What is your number 1 favorite haunted location?
And you already kind of gave the clue away. It is the Logan Mansion. And it's not just because they host me there once a month for a show. The location itself, to me, you know, have you ever gotten to go to Logan Mansion?
I myself have not yet.
You've got to go. You know, they do the open tours are coming up this month in October. You need to go and check their website and their Facebook for that, or call the Logan Mansion directly, because it is a private home. And the LeBrun family, when they got it, They restored it back to its original grandeur. And we're talking the original hardwood floors, the frieze work, all of those things are still existing in the home. And it's almost kind of like a time capsule when you go in there. And the location itself is just strikingly beautiful. You expect that kind of a home to be somewhere in South Louisiana.
So, for those who aren't familiar with Logan Mansion, where is Logan situated in Shreveport?
The best way to describe it is a big gravel parking lot right next to the Municipal. You look across Municipal, there's a gravel parking lot, there's this beautiful house. It's that beautiful house.
So,
and then the old Florentine Club that they're restoring now, too, it's across the street from that.
So, like we just talked about with the Municipal, a proximity to a certain location can influence this paranormal activity. So, Logan's proximity to the mass graves, the cemetery, can influence.
And of course, the Logan Mansion was built in the late 1800s. When you had the economic crisis and the Great Depression, a lot of those larger homes opened up as boarding houses. And the story goes that a little girl was in the third-story window, which is now the attic, and fell from the window to her death. And back then, in the boarding homes and things like that, it wasn't unusual to have things happen. And that's one of the instances that, people talk about. But there's a lot more to Logan with the resident spirits there that I've picked up on. And, Miss LeBrun, the one that owns the home, when she bought that house, she didn't believe in the paranormal. She didn't believe in the whole psychic thing. She didn't believe in any of that. And now, needless to say, she has a medium come to her house once a month to do a show. And whenever I start my show, Vicky stands in front and tells a 20-minute story of all of her paranormal happenings. And she still, she lived in the home now for, I believe, about 6 or 7 years. And she still has things happen. And Vicky will say, I didn't believe in any of this stuff until I came to this house.
It's amazing how, there are skeptics, and I have skeptic streaks, but at the same time, I like to keep my mind open to a lot of different things. And we had a conversation earlier today about, being a skeptic and believing in certain things and what it takes to convert somebody from being a skeptic into being a believer. And sometimes all it takes is moving into a house or...
There's two kind of skeptics, and I always say it this way. You have the people that'll come to my shows. I always say it's the wives that drag their husbands. So it'd be your wife dragging you to one of my shows. But you would be the cool skeptic, which is where, I'm not sure about this guy. Yeah, he's fun. He's putting on a good show, but I'm not sure about this, but I'm open to it. Those people, you can convert. You can go and make them say, okay, yeah, I might not believe in all of this, but that Dakota guy, something's weird about that dude. I don't know what it is, but something's weird about him. And then you have those that are so closed off and closed-minded to all of this that they flat won't believe. You could be in Gettysburg, have the ghost of Lincoln appear, and reread the Gettysburg Address, and they'd be like, nope, not real, it's a hologram.
Yeah. So, you're going to find people one way or the other, but there is one thing that I always find interesting about the increase in paranormal activity that people attach to a certain place. It seems like history, it goes one and the same. You barely ever find a place that is haunted that doesn't have a good historical background to it. It almost,
you never hear anything in South Dakota.
there might be something there, but we just don't know. But but that always, and that's why I think Shreveport, it can be recognized as being a mecca for haunting, is that we do have a lot of history. And like we said before, we'll talk at some point about New Orleans, just the history of New Orleans and the age of New Orleans. It seems like they go hand in hand. If you have history, if you are an old city, you have something going on as far as paranormal activity
one
goes.
of your other most haunted locations in the country is Savannah, Georgia. Yeah. And that was one of your founding towns of this country. And then you go and you have to look at New Orleans, which was around before, the country was.
So that's Shreveport's got the history, and Shreveport has the ghosts, apparently. So, Dakota Lawrence, thank you for coming in and spending some time with us this afternoon.